It's okay. We're called to order. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Okay, yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Roll call, please, Mrs. Nybeck.
Nancy Kupka,
Here.
Deb Boyle,
Here.
Terry Pavasich, here, and Rick Pavanato.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. We have a quorum.
here too.
We have a quorum. And so we'll begin. We're not going to have student perspectives tonight. We'll move right on to the report on the district goals.
Thank you, Dr. Kupka. We have two reports tonight. The first is on the district goals, and this is going to be a departure from what we have often done in the past when making mid-year reports. Instead of going through each one of those goals and talking about approximately what our progress is, the fact of the matter is we're making good progress on the majority of our goals, as would be expected, and we've reported on those before, and it really isn't necessary to talk about them tonight in detail, and we'll report about them at the conclusion of the year when we have all the data. We are really looking tonight at four goal areas that we perceive are challenges for us. There are a couple other ones that we'll report about later. One being the master facility plan that you're aware of. One being rentals that you're aware of, and perhaps there is another one out there to report about. However, we thought this was a nice group to report about tonight because of its timeliness. Some of these things will be coming up soon, and these are things that the board may hear about either internally or out in the community. So we're going to make four reports, and individual persons are going to participate in those reports. The first is PARA, which is Performance Evaluation, the Performance Evaluation Reform Act, which affects teacher evaluation, and specifically the marriage of student performance and teacher evaluation. And Pete's going to talk about that. Is that correct, Pete? Or
That is correct. Thank you, Dr. McDonald. I thought we'd try to give you some of the background information about PARA. This is actually legislation from 2012. There are a couple different facets to this, one of them being once you convene your joint committee, your official PARA committee, you have 180 days to get the entire process decided, or you have to default to the state model. So one of the ways to help that process along is to create what we've done, which is an informal student growth committee that can have a lot of conversation, dialogue, discuss what we're going to do in advance of convening the official committee. Yeah. So that way we're gathering input from various departments, teachers, department chairs, administrators, and then kind of hand that off to what will become our official committee to make the final decisions. So PARA says that starting with the 2016-17 school year, student growth must count 25% towards the final teacher evaluation rating. And then after the first 2 years, that percentage increases to 30%. If we can't agree on how we're going to assess our students and we default to that state model that we referenced before, then this percentage becomes 50%. All right, so student growth then is determined by the results of 2 assessments for each teacher. And again, this is when teachers are on cycle. So each assessment must have a pre-assessment, a non-evaluative midpoint, and a post-assessment. And I also want to stress is this is not for all students or all classes for a teacher. We are able to select one of my assessments will be in my AP US History course. Another one might be in my sociology class. But I don't have to have all of my students and all of my courses being a part of the student growth that will count towards my summative rating. So when we take a look at the 2 assessments, PARA tells us you have to have a type 1 or a type 2, and I'll talk about those here in a minute, and one type 3 assessment. If there are places where we feel a type 1 or type 2 is not appropriate, then that teacher would get 2 type 3 assessments. So, what is a type 1 assessment? Type 1 assessments are standardized tests. These are tests that are widely administered beyond just the state of Illinois, and they're scored by somebody else. Some examples of tests that you've heard us talk about in various ways in the district: performance series, MAP, EPASS, Iowa Test Basic Skills. That whole list that we have there for you are examples of type 1 standardized assessments. Working off 2 things here. So, type 2 assessments are those that are used on a district-wide basis by all teachers in a given course. They can be published assessments or ones that the staff have developed. So what that means is using a textbook publisher's test or something like common formative assessments, common final exams that our staff have worked to create and that we're already using. Type 3 assessments are used by specific teachers within a school or district. They can be teacher developed and they can be rubric or performance based. So in a performance class like a 10th grade music, they would use a type 3 assessment where a rubric is grading the scale playing ability of a student, where a mark might be in an art class with a portfolio of sculpture, writing, or painting, drawing, etc. It might be in a PE class. Those areas that are more performance-based will typically have 2 type 3 assessments. Courses that are singletons, that there's no other district teacher teaching that course, they won't have a type 2 assessment because they're the only one. So they may end up with 2 type 3 assessments. So it becomes very unique and specific to departments and teachers. There's not a one-size-fits-all model across the spectrum of all of our teaching staff. So the Informal Student Growth Committee that's been meeting monthly took a look at each department and made draft recommendations for the types of assessments to be used. So here's like an example of a larger spreadsheet where we said, okay, for English, we're recommending a type 2 and a type 3. Fine arts, we broke down into various components of teachers that make up that department, library, math, etc. So once you have your assessments, and department chairs will be working with classroom teachers on what exactly the assessments will be, you then have to determine which growth model you're going to use to measure the students by. And the state gives you 4 different models to pick from: simple growth, value table, adjusted growth, and value added. Simple growth simply compares the pre-test to post-test performance. This one does not take into account a student's starting point. The value table indicates gains from one proficiency level to the next. So based on a pre-test, students are put into one of 4 categories. And so your growth occurs if you're able to move a student from one category to the next. So from a proficient to an excellent kind of a situation. You get more points if you move students more than one level. But it's also difficult to measure growth because you could have a student who started off at the very early range in one category and climbs all the way up to the last score on that category. So there's been growth that's been demonstrated, but it would not count as growth towards the teacher because the student didn't get out of the box they were in and move into the next one. The third way you can do it is what we call adjusted growth. So they're based on a pre-test score. From that we say, okay, student X should grow by X amount of points. And if they do, that counts as growth for the teacher. If they don't, it doesn't count as growth. One of the drawbacks to this is that the growth projections are usually based on national averages. So this would primarily apply to type 1 assessments due to the way those are scored by a non-district entity, and it's a test given widely beyond Illinois as well. The last one is what they call value added. So this measures gains from one year to the next or from beginning to end of the school year. It employs a statistical model to adjust for factors that are outside the teacher control. One of the main issues we have with this one, though, is it requires a very large student population, a large database. You have to employ a company to do all of the statistical examination for you, and you have to have several years' worth of data. From what I've seen and heard at various workshops, partnering with a company to do all this work for you is between $15,000 and $20,000 a year. And we do not have the student population large enough to truly consider this as one of the growth models. So our informal student growth committee is recommending to the Para Joint Committee that we use the simple growth model for all of our teachers. That's the one that compares the pre-test to the post-test scores. All right, so now we're at the point where we're wanting to communicate to the larger staff just exactly what the requirements are, the kinds of things that we have control over, and trying to help kind of diffuse some of the concern that's out there. 25% of the final rating sounds like a lot to staff when you first hear that. Statistically, the professional practice side will obviously count a lot more, but there's, nevertheless, there's still some anxiety about this. So we are planning department meeting visits during the month of February to kind of go over some of the same information with them. The department chairs and teachers will then start working on which assessments they're going to select to be used. They will help determine the amount of growth that's going to be necessary for the rating levels. And then as a group, the Informal Student Growth Committee, we need to work on developing a rubric for scoring the summative, because you'll be taking kind of the narrative part of the summative document with the mathematical part of the student growth and combining them into a formula to determine the summative rating. Well, that's more work to come here in the not too distant future. The goal here is to have this done by the end of this year so that during 15-16 we can do some pilot work so that by 16-17 that information has helped drive the amount of growth that we're expecting that's going to count for the teacher evaluations. So that was kind of a quick drive-by, if you will, of Para and what we're doing so far in the district. I'll entertain any questions before we hand it over for standardized testing.
Go ahead.
Pete, how big was this committee? And then what was the makeup as far as teachers versus administration?
I believe 21 altogether, and I think it's a 17-14 teacher to administrator
Okay.
count. When we have the final Para Joint Committee, that has to be a 50-50 split.
Right.
But even in that, I would be having some conversation with Lois where I would suggest that we might have, say, 4 voting members from the teacher group and 4 from the administrator group,
Yeah.
or whatever number we settle on, but that the teacher group be larger than the 4, but they all know going into it who the voting members are.
Okay.
We made sure we had representation from all departments.
That was my next question. This group was pretty broad then.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
And it's working together, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think everybody's in a pretty comfortable place.
Good.
In terms of where we are. We are not quite as far along as I thought we might be at this point. We spent probably 2 or 3 meetings just kind of understanding the kind of foundational groundwork for this that I didn't think would take as much time as it did.
Yeah.
But in hindsight, it was time well spent.
I was going to say it's probably time well spent.
Yeah. I think it contributed to people being a little more at ease with the process and what the next steps will be for us.
Okay, good. Good.
Nancy?
So I'm a little confused as to exactly 25% of what we're measuring. Are we talking about, history where I didn't know about World War II and now I know facts about World War II? Or are we talking about being able to build a more logic model like you would in a mathematics course or a chemistry course? I'm not sure what the 25% is your pre-post we're measuring is.
Sure. So for example, let's just say we decide that one of our assessments for a teacher will be type 2, and it might be the final exam from first semester as the post-assessment. We would have a pre-assessment that's given to the students in the first couple of days of the course. So, it's a first semester final exam on U.S. history. So there'd be some kind of pre-test. Halfway through, there's a mid to kind of get a sense of where they are. Allows the teacher the opportunity to make any changes in the instruction that they're doing in order to help get the students where they want them to be at the end. And then based on that post-assessment, we take a look at the score differential. Where were they on the pre, where were they on the post, and then there's a range, right? So we may say something like, again, this is kind of, throwing something out there for you. It could be that 10 points and above in growth is, 0 to 10 points puts you into the bottom of the 4 rating category areas. 11 to 25 puts you into the next one. 26 to whatever. And then you take that box plus the box that was already determined by the professional practice, and you have to weight them, that 75, 25%. Those combine to give you your final summative rating. So we have to develop like an equation of professional practice, student growth equals summative rating.
See, I don't think I asked my question right. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
So student growth can be indicative of mastering facts.
It can be. I guess one of the cautions I would have is a type 3 assessment could be a unit. So it could be that the math teachers want to see from the beginning of this unit to the end of that unit, which might be only 3 weeks worth of instruction.
Right.
How did the students do? How did they grow?
Right.
So it might be mastery on a small segment of the larger semester or year, which you'll probably find more often in a type 3 assessment.
I got
The
it.
type 2 will probably be a greater period of time, but again, not necessarily. They may say all Math 1 teachers are going to give this common formative assessment, and that becomes a type 2.
I got it. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
The next topic is standardized testing, or testing for accountability, and primarily this testing is associated with the acronym PARC, which is Performance Assessment for College and Career Readiness. Is that correct?
Yes.
And in the sense of, we've had a number of presentations about Common Core integrated curriculum, which we think has been very positive in our district. The testing part of it has been a conundrum, and that's not just in our district, it's across the state of Illinois. There are a number of issues with it. Among them are the scheduling of it. And so we'd like to share with you what that looks like, as well as how the ACT is going to look, as well as issues associated with it, like whether students can opt to not take it or not. So, Ms. Sicardi?
Okay, thank you. So in the beginning, I will talk a little bit about the changes in testing. Dr. McDonald mentioned the ACT and whatnot. Then I'll have Janice Schwartz share some more information with you regarding PARC. Okay? So as Dr. McDonald said, in the past, the PSAE, the Prairie State Achievement Exam, was required for all grade 11 juniors to take in April, 2 days in April. The first day was the ACT. The second date was the Workies. And those two combined were accountability for schools, determining whether or not schools made adequate yearly progress. the state has discontinued or eliminated the PSAE. So no longer do students, juniors, take the PSAE. What the state did this year, and we're not really sure moving forward where this will go, but what the state did this year was allow districts to make a choice if they wanted to administer the ACT with writing. If districts decided to do so, it was all or nothing. So it's not like you can test some students and not other students. You can only test grade 11, so only juniors. And also it was the ACT with writing, not an option to do it with or without writing. Like most schools, we decided to administer it, and that test will be on March 3rd. You may recall that we have a group of students who will be going to Carnegie Hall during that time period. Those students, and we even brought this to their attention as early as September, will obviously be out of town for the March 3rd testing. However, the state has a makeup date, so those students will be testing on March 17th. Those parents have also received a letter letting them know. So we have taken that into consideration. But that date, March 3rd, was set by the state, not set by us, as is the makeup date. So we'll be testing the juniors, unlike the way we've tested in recent years. So when we had the PSAE those 2 days, we tested, the juniors took the PSAE, the sophomores took a retired or practice PSAE, and our freshmen took the plan test. So they were just testing days. Were not any regular classes going on. Because of these changes, we will be having a regular school day on those days. So the juniors will take the test in the field house in the morning till approximately 12:30 or so. They'll have lunch, and then they'll go to class periods 7 and 8. And then the freshmen, sophomores, and seniors will have regular classes as they do on any other day. If a student obviously is absent, they'll take the makeup, as will those students who are on the band trip. And we've obviously informed parents in a couple of different ways, but also in terms of the newsletter that just came out. So that parents understand that it's just 1 day of testing, and then it's being done differently than it has in past years. So those are the changes that relate to the PSAE and the ACT. The PARCC test, which we'll spend some time talking about, is what Illinois has put in place. We're one of 13 states that is part of this partnership, and we will be starting PARCC testing very soon. And with that, I will turn it over to Janice.
So in your board documents, you can see that you have a link. You don't need to go to that now, but that's just an overview of the park. And then as you can, if you go to that page, you'll see there are many different sublinks that you could go to and look at sample test items and directions and all those kinds of things. It's pretty comprehensive. So we thought it was probably fair to talk about the challenges of the test first because it's in the news a lot. The PARCC test is surrounded by political turmoil, I would say. States are very divided on that, and there are a few reasons for that, I think. One of them is that the test is primarily computer-based, and like us, many schools are not one-to-one yet, and so that create some challenges in scheduling. We have to be very creative in how we can get our students tested in the computer environment without disrupting classes too much. In fact, we've spent several hours on that today. So I'm working with Dr. Sorensen, and then Omar Davis and Lucia are working on that. Lucia Mastrodemos are working on it south. So we work very closely with Gina to work on the scheduling of everything. We also have to provide students an opportunity to do tutorial because they're not used to taking tests on a computer. Most of the tests that students have taken have been hand scored, and so this will be a little different for them. So to make sure that they're prepared for it, we have to give them an opportunity to do that as well. Perhaps the biggest concern for teachers is the amount of time the test takes. Overall, this test will be administered over a period of 9 days. So students will be sitting for about 2 hours on 9 different times between March 9th and the end of May. Now we have some flexibility on when we actually administer the test. So we've spread that out so students aren't continually missing class over and over and over again. But that has been a challenge for us and is a challenge for our teachers to try to still cover their curriculum while also giving these tests. And then it's a challenge, of course, for our students to sit and take that many tests in a row. And then it's been slow in terms of getting some information and sample tests and things like that for us to prepare. So luckily this first year is more considered like a pilot year, and so we're able to figure things out, and it's not, there's not a high accountability associated with it at this point. Given all of that, some people may be like, well, why are we giving it? Well, first of all, we have to give it, but I would also argue that there is a lot of value to the test as well. In my opinion, this test is much better aligned to the curriculum than, say, the ACT. The ACT test is something that isn't correlated really with any one curriculum, whereas the PARCC test is completely aligned with the Common Core state standards. And as you know, as Dr. McDonald said, we've been approaching the Common Core state standards for several years, a multidisciplinary approach. So our students are prepared for that, and when we get the results, we feel that our teachers will actually see the results from those tests and be able to make decisions about their instruction in their class, and that will be very helpful. So I think that's a huge value to it as well. I think it's also more authentic than the ACT. You know, currently students can take a class like an Excel Edge class or something like that and raise their scores. Common Core is not going to be like that. The questions that they ask, there's no just tricks to it that you're going to get a better score. And it also really kind of eliminates some of the guessing component, because some of the questions, if you give an answer, the next question actually asks you how you know that was the answer. And if you don't get that one right, you don't get the other answer right either. So we feel like it's a more authentic and maybe more genuine, accurate test for our students as well. So, you know, I think down the line, when we start getting these results, we're going to find that this is very valuable for us. With any new thing, there are going to be challenges, and so we've, you know, kind of embraced them and, you know, kind of moved beyond that and tried to put some things into place to minimize the challenges on our instructional time. I did want to clarify the problem-based assessment versus the end of year, because there's a lot of confusion in the public from that. When the first test is being given in March and the second test is being given in May, some people are under the impression that those two tests are measuring growth, but that's actually not the case at all. It's not like a pre and a post test like we were talking about for para. The problem-based assessment actually has items on it which have to be scored by a human. So there's going to be essays, there's going to be explanations of math problems. So that takes a little bit longer to score than just like a, you know, kind of Scantron kind of test. The end of year is all just sort of fill in the blank run by a machine. So that's why there's the differences in the tests, okay, which is, I think, something that's confusing for some.
And who does the scoring?
That'll be interesting. We don't know all that yet. Pearson is the person who's putting out the test, and so they're kind of in charge. It is not, definitely not scored in-house. So it will go out. This I thought was really helpful for you to see, and I know you don't necessarily have the time to read the question, but this is a sample question for ELA. And a couple things I want to point out to you here. First of all, the student here is being asked to read 3 different nonfiction articles, and then have to pull information from each of them and write an essay. So if you think about that, there are a lot of critical thinking skills going on there. This student has to be able to read and read very critically, pulling out most important information. Synthesis is a high-level skill. So taking those ideas, and my guess is we probably will have to write an argument, something about, was this a good idea? You know, and that also was another skill. So that's what I mean by being a really authentic test that's aligned to our curriculum, because these are the kinds of tests that we would ask our students to do. We don't want them just to regurgitate information. We want them to critically think and come up with an opinion and use evidence to support that. And these are the types of questions that we see. This is actually a sample question for 9th graders, and that's who we're testing this year. So it gives you a good idea for the ELA. And then the math, you can see, also has a lot of skills. I'm maybe not quite as skilled at telling you exactly what they're asking for in that math equation, but some of you might know. But what I would like to point out that's really different than the usual math is that they're showing their work. On here, they have to explain their reasoning. And as you know, that's a habit of mine that has been stressed in our math, is stressed in our science next gen standards. So students need to be able to show why they have come up with this answer. So again, there's just no guessing here. You can't just pick B and hope that you got the right answer. You have to show it. And our students are very prepared for this because this is what they do daily in their math classes. So for these reasons, looking at questions like this, I feel really good about this and say our students are ready for this, and the the information that we get back from the scorers will tell us, did our students master these objectives, which are aligned to our standards. So those are some good things. Just thought it might be helpful also just to hear the testing logistics. So as I mentioned, we have spread it out over 9 days. Our freshmen are primarily going to be tested, but there also will be some sophomores. So we were given, I think in December, an opportunity to select which courses we want tested. Originally, we were told it was going to be English 3 and the equivalent of Math 3, which for us would have been AAT 300. We were told that we could switch if we wanted to, and so we chose our Math 1 and English 1, because that's where we have focused our efforts with our Common Core. We're still, rolling it out, Math 3 next year. Primarily, our English 1 and Math 1 classes are filled with freshmen and sophomores. Most of them are not taking the AP test that a lot of the juniors would be taking. You'll have some sophomores taking some AP tests, but it won't be the same. And this is our second year with Math 1, so we felt pretty comfortable with testing our students there as well. So that's why we chose those students. So some 9th graders will be taking we'll be taking all 9 tests. So they'll be taking the Math 1 and the English 1. But some of our 9th graders, for example, might be in Math 2. Or they might be in Foundation, so they'll only be taking the English test. And some of our sophomores might be in Math 1, and so they'll only be taking the math test. So not all of our students that are in this group will be sitting for tests 9 times in a row, but a lot of our freshmen probably will be. I think we figured out there's about 180 or so fewer students taking the Math 1 test than the English 1, just because of the number of kids that are in Math 2 or Foundations. So we have tried to focus our testing environment so that we can be as least disruptive as possible. There are no field trips for freshmen or sophomores during these testing windows, because we don't want them going on a field trip even on a different day that week, because kids are already missing. And we also have scheduled students into blocks. And so students will be in a block A, a block B, or a block C. So for example, the English test, the performance-based assessment, is a 3-day, it's a 3-session test, 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours. So if I'm a student in group A, on the first day I'm going to take that test during periods 1 and 2. On the second day, I'm going to take it during period 4 and 5, and on the third day, I'm going to take it in period 7 and 8. So that way, I have not missed any class over and over and over again. So we'll be rotating our students through. And then we're trying to localize where we're testing so that we can kind of keep students in as quiet of an area as possible. That's a little difficult, again, because of the computers. We are using our Chromebooks with students to make sure that we have that under control for next year. And then we're also using some laptops and some desktops. Finally, there is a no opt-out option. So ISB has been very, very strong about this, that all students should be tested, and that parents do not have an option to tell your students that they don't have to take it. Last year, you might remember during the pilot, students did have an option to say, I'm not going to do it, and some of the parents did choose to opt out. That is not the case with this one. If the student does not come to school that day, we will schedule the student for a makeup, and we will do everything in our power to get those students taking the test. We do feel that that information that we get back will be valuable, and so we'll be sending that very clear message to our parents and our students as well.
And along those lines, not only can the students or parents not opt out, we can't opt not to give the tests. It's very clear that we're required to administer the PARCC tests. So as Janice alluded to, we have spent a great deal of time this year preparing for this. In fact, as administrators, and we just met today for about an hour and a half, we meet regularly to really comb through everything and make sure we've dotted every I and crossed every T. We've been very fortunate because we're working together, so it's not just one building working, we're working together and helping each other. There are a number of webinars provided through PARCC, through ISB, and many of us have done webinars, what is literally almost every week. There's a different webinar. We all belong to different organizations. So, for example, I belong to CADCA, which is the Chicago Area Curriculum Directors, and we've had numerous meetings about PARCC where we just talked about some of the challenges and how is your district dealing with this? How are you doing that? I know Janice has a group of CNI associate principals, and there's tech groups, and so we're all really coming together. So we're each bringing different lenses and able to get information from many different districts as well. We are planning a half-day training for the proctors to ensure that everyone knows how to administer the test, as well as problem solve when and if things are not working the way they expect them to, understand their responsibilities, understand how to handle it if a student does not take the test, or we are working with our tech staff. Our tech staff has really been great. They are even doing practice tests. So they're not only working on the technology behind the scenes, there's a practice database that they can go into and actually take park tests, and they're testing it in different environments, at different times of the day, different tests. So we've really been very fortunate that, that they've been on board with that. We have shared this with teachers pretty much from the beginning to talk about park testing so that they would understand what this would mean for their classes and how we plan to schedule students in. I know Dr. McDonald has had it several times in his communication on your mark about park testing, and even the letter that was part of the newsletter we sent ahead of time to teachers so that they would know what, in case students asked them or parents called them, they would know what communication we're sharing. And then, of course, the parent newsletter and informing students. So we've tried to communicate this pretty much at every level. There'll be more communication coming to students as it gets closer to those testing dates in terms of where to report and whatnot. But we've really been trying to get the news out there so that everyone understands not only why we're testing and that we have to test, but the logistics of that as well. Well, if you have any questions.
I had one. I just wanted to say thanks for thinking about the teachers and having the foresight to stagger this, because it would be very easy to just say, hey, we're going to do it for 3 days in a row, 1 and 2 or 2 and 3, and just keep the schedule the same, and then that person in that classroom would be 3 days behind. So I know the logistics behind that is much more harder and takes a little bit more thought, but thank you. I think from a teacher standpoint, I think that's going to be much more appreciated.
I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
is part of this an since it is the first time, really, I mean, you did the practice, are there folks that are going to listen to the problems that come about? Because I know, like, last year I heard that the servers crashed all over the place, and that it was almost impossible for some of the kids to take the testing. So, what's the state planning to do? Do you know? No.
Well, they did respond a little bit, I would say, because last year the testing times were actually much more extensive, and they found that students didn't need that time, and they scaled them back quite a bit. So that's good. They did listen to some of those things, and they do provide opportunities for all of us at every level to provide feedback as we administer the test on what's worked and what's not worked. And this year they even have a 2-page communication plan, so that if you have a comment or a question about this, you go here, and this, you go here, which is very different than last year. Okay. So that's positive. I don't know what other.
Well, and if we run into obstacles, we will not hesitate to let them know, as I'm sure is true of all districts.
Yeah.
And certainly, they heard loud and clear some of the issues, and they have tried to rectify a lot of those. But this is new. This is the first time of full implementation, full testing.
and we don't have a choice.
No.
Right, we don't,
No, we don't
that
have
we
a
need, we
choice.
don't have a choice on this.
We do not.
But I
Yeah,
guess my big concern is the amount of time that this, I don't know, I saw some of the questions, I thought they were pretty good, but, don't ask me them. It's been a long time since I've been in the classroom,
I think
but,
this is somewhat of an example of the theory of ready, fire, aim. I think this, the people, the policymakers, State Board of Education, and whoever else is involved in this, decided this had to be done, and they're going to do it by the seat of their pants.
right.
Or by thoughtful thinking, and it's been a combination of both. I think if you look, one example of them listening would be the fact that at the beginning of the school year, we were testing juniors, or it wasn't necessarily, it would be predominantly juniors because it would be the junior math course and the junior English course. So there would have been some younger students in that group and some older ones, primarily juniors. But as Janice and Gina pointed out, juniors also take the ACT test, and many juniors take AP tests, and so now you're testing juniors almost to exhaustion. So they gave us the option of testing another group. We chose freshmen. We thought that for a number of reasons, both in terms of the alignment with what the kids have already learned in school, and the fact that it's more a homogeneous group, less spread out than the juniors and easier to plan.
Yeah.
That was our option. Now, we had a week to make that choice. We were told, I think, like Monday, we had to figure it out by Friday, or something like, it may have been a little longer than that, but it was not much longer than that.
4/14.
Okay, so that, and obviously Gina, Janice, people at the schools, Ken, Lukia, Omar, they've done an incredible amount of work behind the scenes that nobody knows about, but without that work, that would be difficult or impossible to do this. So there has been a lot of pushback from the schools to the State Board of Education. Sometimes it doesn't seem like they listen. I'm also aware, though, there's pushback from the U.S. Department of Education to the Illinois State Board of Education, and they're sort of in the middle of that too. So we'll see. We're going to see how this works.
Well, I do thank you all for putting in the time and effort into this and having the patience in order to deal with the state, because, as we all know, sometimes you need the 2x4 to get their attention. So.
And I think picking the freshman might be a good choice because maybe someday down the road, we'll be able to test them 4 years and see the progression or the growth or the progress that they made over the course of their 4 years. So I think that was a good choice, picking the freshman.
And most schools did. Most schools did not stay with the junior level courses.
Yeah, I think that was a good choice.
Gina, I had a question, if I could just back up a little bit, talking about the ACT testing this year. I'm just wondering about the sort of the conditions of which the kids will be testing this year, because that's all juniors on one day, and you mentioned like the field house. We have how many juniors? Let's just say at South High,
We have
right?
probably about 600 testing at South and maybe 490.
So are we putting all of the students in the field house then? And how will that look? Are we looking at long tables? I mean, I remember in previous years, the students taking the ACT, and it would usually be divided up. You'd go into certain classrooms, you had your own desk. And so I'm wondering, when you're taking a test like that, you need to be comfortable.
Absolutely.
And I'm just wondering what the conditions are going to be like when you have a school day going on still. You have 600 students now that are flooding the field house. And I'm just wondering if we're going to see a potential drop in ACT scores just based on the testing conditions.
Well, prior to doing the PSAE in the classrooms, we did large-scale PSAE testing, so ACT day one as well. And most schools did. We have had many years of doing large-scale testing. We did the practice, for example, the practice ACT in the field house. And we minimized disruptions. There's no bells going off, students aren't allowed to exit, all those types of conditions. There's numerous adults and proctors, supervisors in the room. While it may not be ideal, certainly testing in the classrooms, it is one thing we've done for years. Because it is a regular school day, that puts some constraints on us. But we're doing the best we can to minimize any possible disruptions so the students can reap the benefits of doing well.
I'd also say that previously we had the ability for the Prairie State Achievement Exam to just have school with only testing. And so some students didn't have to come to school. Others came on one day but not the other day. And that was based on state policy that we could do that. Well, that state policy no longer applies to the ACT test because it's not the official state exam, Now that's the park. And we had tried to get the State Board of Education to give us a ruling saying that we could do the ACT without having other kids at school. They just did not do that. I would also say that it may or may not be the most optimum conditions, but the majority of our students right now who are going to college take the ACT multiple times. So typically, the score we get when our seniors graduate is the best score they've earned. It's not the
Right.
one that take at school. So I'm not, I'm not sure that I'm not sure it's going to make a dramatic difference in the scores our kids achieve. Certainly, if that occurs, then we'll have to look at that. But the other side of the coin is we may not be able to give the ACT during school in the future.
Right. Well, the reason I ask it is I know
Go back
that,
to just a Saturday like all of us in this room did.
right, yes.
Saturday.
And I realize that, and I wasn't trying to be, I know that that is the score that our students will send to the colleges. That's what they're looking at right now. And I do know that most students probably take it at least another time, but they also have to pay
Correct.
for that too. So there'll be many students who might not take it a second time. And so I just ask, how optimal it is. And as just a district with the potential of seeing a lesser score that goes to the state, that's one thing that we, certainly.
We do look at several scores, though,
Need.
just so you know. We look at growth between Explore and ACT. So this will give us that data. We'll use the March 3rd. So those students who in 8th grade took Explore. And then we also use, as Dr. McDonald said, their highest score. So we look at it a couple of different ways,
Okay.
not just one way.
Thank you.
And to piggyback on that, did we explore whether or not we can give that next year?
The ACT. During the school day and state-sponsored, we do not know yet.
Okay, all
I
right.
have not heard anything definitive yet.
Because I thought there would be a dollar amount that, they would charge us for that if we opted to do that, but
We really don't know yet. Hasn't
So
been decided.
I have a few things I'd like to piggyback on. One concern, I'll just kind of go backwards with some of the things, because all good points. So maybe in our master facility planning going forward, one component to think about is what is the ideal test conditions and having the facilities to deliver that, because that affects student, if this is how we're going to be measured in terms of student achievement, that's one way that we can affect that, that measurement by having the ideal conditions to administer a test. So hopefully that's something that can be taken into account. While I appreciate very much what Rick was saying about, not trying to compact this in, we still have, if I'm understanding right, the freshmen are going to miss a couple hours every day so how are the students, what's their opportunity to make up the lost instructional time? How is that being dealt with? How are those teachers, going to help those students?
And it'll be different in every class. We're scheduling the students by class. So my English class, first period, English 1, would all test in the same cohort. So as Jana spoke about, the first day will be periods 1 and 2, and then it'll be different the other days. So at least they will be together as a class. But there will be classes that they miss. And we'll share the student names with the teachers so that they know they will be excused from those classes, obviously. But that's true.
So
And
that-
I think some of that should improve next year as we're one-to-one, because obviously, as Jana said, we're going to use Chromebooks. And with students having Chromebooks, that will help that to some degree.
Well, hopefully
We do not-
they'll work with the students. I could see the timing with, inevitably, there's going to be some student that's going to be, that was a, hopefully they're avoiding that being a test day. The teachers will know this, but
And we shared those dates with the
Quizzes
teachers
and-
already.
so, but I can see that being a logistical issue and would have been even worse if we hadn't done it the way we're doing it. So I'm glad we're doing it this way. Still, there's a challenge.
And that was part of the reason why we selected freshmen, given the opportunity, because they tend to have the most classes in common.
Oh, good
So,
point.
Again,
Yeah.
you'll see that.
Yeah.
If we would have stayed with juniors, I think it would have been a greater disruption.
Right. Last year, we were one of the kind of the pilot test districts that participated in this, and we administered the test manually at South, and then they did the computer model at North, and so it got administered at South, but North was it was a total crazy, didn't work. So that is a concern. I heard Terry's voice, and I just wonder have they done work to deal with those glitches? I mean, is that what we're hearing? That they really feel confident about that?
That is our understanding.
That could be a major problem.
A little stressful.
Right.
If I can just interrupt, so if that was to occur, can we still administer manually?
No.
No.
You mean
Okay.
paper pencil? No.
Yeah, okay. Sorry.
And then we used to make really good use out of the Explore Plan Act testing models and using that as a measurement of growth. And now, what's the model? How are we going? I'm not following how we're going to be able to measure that same from 8th grade to 9th grade to 11th grade. How are we going to deal with that with the park?
I'm not sure we have an answer to that yet.
Well-
That's part of the issue.
Scary.
It's part of the challenge.
And frankly, those testing products are not going to be available in the future.
Yeah.
So that's a moot point. I mean, the ones that you mentioned are not going to be published anymore.
This
We're
is
actually
really
very fortunate in District 99. We actually purchased Retired Explore and Plan tests and ACT, so we've been able to administer. Other schools have
Are
not been
not.
able to. So we've been very fortunate to be able to keep that as long as we have.
well. And we're talking about strategic plan tonight and a little bit here, and I mean, this is something that we looked at in terms of so we're not just comparing this year's freshman's class to last year's freshman class, that we're actually looking at a group of students and how they progress through, and we're measuring our own success by that, and we're going to lose this very valuable tool. This is really concerning to me.
Well, and while Janice explained, we're not measuring, or they're not, excuse me, measuring growth between the PBA and the EOI, at some point, if the test is, and we don't know what the future holds, but ultimately the idea was to measure growth. So students will be taking it in 8th grade, for example, and then freshman year, and then we don't know what the future holds. But the idea is that Park ultimately would allow us to measure growth in a way different than we have been, but that's one of the goals.
Okay.
Now, what that looks like, I do not know yet.
I think a year ago, if you were talking to the State Board of Education, they would have said that Park is going to be 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. So the measurement of growth is between those three grade levels. And frankly, part of the theory for that was associated with the para legislation. That was supposed to be at least part of the assessment for growth was to come from the park testing.
Okay.
Now, that is, as you've identified, one of the critical issues, Mike, is where those students are going to miss 9 times 2, 18 hours of school. And when it goes to, if it goes to 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, you can see the logistical
Yeah.
issues there, whereas, everyone will have their own device, so we can accommodate that differently than we do now. We won't have to be scheduled in computer labs. But that said, that really is going to affect teaching and learning for an extended period of time. And that's been one of the huge skirmish points in this whole thing, is that, really? You're going to really test that much? That many kids, that much? But that's the rub we're trying to deal with.
Well, I appreciate, it's mandated, we must do it or face financial hardship or something, they'll hold back money on us. But what about a parent who says, I'm not going to let my kid take the test?
We are required to administer it. If the student sits and doesn't take the test, assuming that the student, and this is something we're discussing at multiple levels, the student could come in and not take the test. But we have to administer it.
Can we hold their diploma? They don't take it?
I don't think we can do that. I haven't heard
I mean,
of that.
I'm just
but
asking.
And right now, they're still working on the graduation requirements, because as you know, the PSA used to be a graduation requirement. Well, it's difficult to require something that no longer exists. So they're working on that. Exactly what that will look like is a lot of this is yet to be determined. You know, we're doing our best with what we know and what we have to do for this year, trying to minimize all the disruptions and protect instructional time and do everything we can to make sure it works. But a lot of this is still yet to be determined.
They're shooting from the hip then.
Well, I
They
I like
describe it.
Mark's analogy, was ready, fire, aim. That- All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One-to-one staff development. This is Rod, Ken, and Omar, and Gina. All right.
So you've heard a lot about the one-to-one initiative, but what we'd like to focus on for this presentation is about the instructional technology professional development. We've done a great deal in terms of professional development. And so I asked Omar Davis, who is our new associate principal at South, and of course you know Dr. Sorensen, to join me because they really have been an integral part of this. In fact, and I think I've mentioned this before when we've done our one-to-one learning presentations, but in order to determine the PD and how to focus that PD, we get input from multiple sources. It's not as if we just decide what we're going to do and move forward. We have done a lot of things in terms of one-to-one, including site visits to other schools. We've looked at other models. We've asked, what have they done in terms of professional development? How have you prepared teachers for teaching in a one-to-one environment? And then, of course, we're trying to learn from them not only what they did that worked, but perhaps those things that did not. And so certainly we've done a lot the last few years in terms of site visits, but there's also several committees that provide input. We have an instructional technology steering committee that consists of Rod, Ken, Omar, me of course, and our two instructional technology coordinators. We have one in each building, John Orick at South and Lisa Lichman at North, and also Colleen Davern, who is in charge of our network. So we all come together and meet every other week, and PD is an integral part of those meetings. We also have pilot teacher groups in both buildings that meet. Sometimes those meetings are touch-based type of meetings. Sometimes they are very targeted to a certain app or skill or way of teaching in a one-to-one learning environment. Sometimes it's to gather information. So we have their input in terms of moving forward. We also have instructional technology advisory committees. There's one in each building. Dr. Sorensen and Lisa Lichman head up the one at North, and Omar and John Orick head up the one at South. And there's representatives there from various different departments. We have a professional growth committee, which meets several times a year. That committee is actually headed by Pete. It's a large committee, and their charge is with basically our Institute Days, predominantly the August and now the June Institute Days, and there's representatives from every department on that committee as well. And then there's Professional Growth Steering Committee, which is a smaller subgroup of district administration. And then, of course, we gather input from our faculty members through various different modes. So surveys, just information sharing. We just had a session that we'll talk about in a few minutes where we asked specific questions to help us gather that information. So it's through these many different groups with a lot of different representation from various teachers, administrators, that we move forward in terms of the PD that we have provided in the past and that we will continue to provide.
So I'm going to speak a bit about the things we've done leading up to this year. And I guess personally speaking, leading up to this year, I have to think back 10 years. I've been here for 10 years in District 99, and I think Ed Schwartz, my counterpart for 8 years in this role, would agree with me that our tech meetings 10 years ago were very different than what they are right now. Those meetings 10 years ago were a lot of conversations about boxes and wires. What labs do we need to replace? What kind of operating systems do we need to upgrade? And as you can imagine, those conversations have changed, particularly in the last few years. Incredibly fascinating conversations and daunting at the same time with the progression of technology and how technology is being utilized in the classroom by our teachers. So it's been fast-paced, trying to keep up with all of it and trying to find things that we want to incorporate here in District 99 that make sense. Not because they're new, not because they're neat, but because they're going to make an impact on student learning. So, as Gina mentioned, we talked to a lot of districts. We're not going to operate in a box. We want to find and work with other schools that are exploring these tools, these skills as well, to learn from them. So last year, as you recall, we hosted a pilot. We had 100 Chromebooks in each building, second semester, and we had some really great feedback from those pilot teachers. And we ended last year at our June day with a pilot panel. So an opportunity for our pilot teachers last year to share their experiences with our faculty. And those were really helpful, provided really helpful insight to our teachers in terms of what does one-to-one learning look like. And the timing couldn't have been better for us to host what is called a Chromebook Institute just 2 weeks later. At North High School, we hosted a Chromebook Institute, which is an outside organization that provides training related to instructional technology, Chromebooks, the Chrome browser, Google Drive. So we hosted that, and we had a number of teachers present. We had a number of teachers attend. And it was really a great 2 days in District 99 for us to be able to host that in the wake of that first pilot program. So the conversations couldn't have been better timed. I mean, it really built some excitement coming off of that pilot, going into the summer, and teachers were really thinking out of the box, thinking about the potential that one-to-one learning has if we were to go down that road. And as you know, we have a number of professional development strands in District 99, cooperative learning, assessment literacy, differentiated instruction, what used to be called CRIS, and looking at our literacy coaching model. And those are all very important and really integral to what we do, but we also have to start thinking about how technology can help with any of those strands. So that's becoming embedded in all of the strands that we do. And Lisa Lichman and John Ork are working closely with those coaches and those facilitators to help teachers understand how and when technology might help them with some cooperative learning strategies or differentiating their classroom with technology. So this is just another component of all of those. It's not necessarily an additional strand, it's really embedded into what we do and how we operate in District 99. We've always tried to send teachers to conferences, whether they're local, regional, and sometimes even national, related to instructional technology and embedding technology in the classroom. In fact, we've got a couple of conferences coming up this month in February. A popular conference called ICE, which is Illinois Computing Educators. We send a number of people to that conference, and we often have teachers presenting there. Another one called METC, which is in St. Charles this year, and that's coming up next week. A number of teachers attending that conference as well. And probably not surprising with other districts going one-to-one after their second or third year, particularly for us, close counterparts that we've worked with. Leiden has been one-to-one. This is their third year. Maine Township, Glenbrook, they're starting to offer their own workshops and symposia. We've been going to Leiden's. This will be the third summer that we've attended their one-to-one symposium. So we've had a number of opportunities to send teachers there, ourselves as administrators to learn what school districts are doing in the classroom and in terms of professional development. So a lot of really great local resources for us, which has been exciting. And the neat thing about all of this is we have wonderful people doing wonderful things for kids in the classroom, but also they're doing wonderful things for their peers. They're teaching each other how to use technology in the classroom, and that's really exciting. And that's where you really have some transformative conversations occurring about education. when they're sharing successes, when they're even sharing failures. You know, hey, I tried this and it didn't work, so here's how I need to do this differently. Those are some really incredible and powerful conversations that are occurring and have been occurring for the past couple of years as we begin to think more and more about one-to-one learning. John Orrick, Lisa Lichman, our librarians have been incredible resources for our teachers, going into classrooms, working with teachers, even doing some co-teaching with them, and really providing some guidance and resource for them to take some positive risks and step outside their comfort zone. So they've been really helpful. And there's some individualized learning there going on with John and Lisa and our librarians. And the pilot teachers have been incredibly awesome. Just really innovative people trying to do new things in the classroom, take some positive risks, and so there's a lot of learning going on with our pilot teachers last year, and even the bigger group this year. Just really, really positive things coming out of that. So, leading up to this year, a number of conversations about Common Core state standards. Our August Institute days this year really focused on Common Core. That also includes technology, just another example of how we have to think about how technology can help with learning in the classroom. So whether it's the 21st century writer and what that means in terms of technology, when we think about kids trying to understand their audience, when they try to make an argument, and how do they make an impactful argument, and oftentimes technology is part of that. How can technology help you make an argument one way or the other? So those are really helpful conversations, again, led by teachers in the classroom teaching their peers about Common Core state standards, and some of those conversations came back to how technology can help you to that end. So it's been exciting, and we're always trying to work with other school districts to find out where they might be sending their teachers and getting feedback on what are some good, worthwhile conferences, workshops, seminars that we should be sending our teachers to so that they can come back and share with their peers. So it's certainly an exciting time. A lot of great learning going on between teachers, which is exciting. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Omar, who will continue what we've been doing this year.
Thanks, Ken. First, I'd like to say it's a pleasure to meet our board. It's for the first time face-to-face, so it's good to put faces with names. So it's good to meet each of you. In transitioning into this year and the work that we've currently done and the work we've already done, Ken spoke to the number of things that have really built momentum with instructional technology in our building. It continues. We've drawn off that momentum and used it this year to really implement some great opportunities for our teachers. Working with John and Lisa, it's very interesting how things continue to grow. A lot of our teachers are receiving that individual technology sessions, those individual sessions with John and Lisa, and they're learning new things and they're trying new things in their classrooms and really changing the way they teach. They're changing the way our students are able to learn. That teacher then shares that tool or trick with another teacher, and then that momentum just continues and builds. So we've really drawn off of that this year, and we were able to offer in October several great sessions for teachers. One of the things that we've started to realize is that we are going to have to scaffold our training. There are teachers who are a little bit more advanced and are ready to go when it comes to technology. Some of the training will have to be scaled back for teachers who are those first timers, if you will. So, but again, that momentum continues to build in our building. In October, we were able to offer managing paper load in Google Drive, and really an introduction done by our staff members, or given to our staff members, to introduce them to sending out documents via Google Drive and managing your paper load and organizing files and being able to send those out to students. One of the most interesting parts of how teachers are able to incorporate the instructional technology into the classroom is the peer and self-assessment. I had the opportunity to be in the classroom for students who are practicing fluency. There are ELL students, and one of the most awesome tool that I had an opportunity to experience these students are able to record their own voice and record themselves speaking, and then send it to the teacher. That teacher can then critique their fluency, their articulation with the English language. But more importantly, before that assignment went to the teacher, it went to another student. It went to their partner. And that partner was able to hear that student, hear their partner speak, and then give them some assessment, give them some feedback on the assignment, and then they then sent it on to the teacher. So again, just Ken mentioned the several different strands that we currently have, and one of those is formative assessment, and finding different ways to assess our students. Technology really brings that out with our ability to be able to have students assess themselves and also their peer assessment as well. Presenting with digital media, we have several teachers who are developing their online classrooms. Teachers are able to submit documents, submit helpful tips for our students. The biggest impact is they are able to access, or they will be able to access, this information at home. So the instruction doesn't end in the classroom. If there are, you're working on an assignment during the day, you don't quite remember a formula or how the teacher came up with the answer, a lot of teachers are able to go to those digital classrooms and pull up the day's lesson and look back and say, okay, I understand now because I'm able to see a video of Mike McGinnis performing a lesson or performing a problem in the classroom. So again, that learning doesn't stop in the classroom, and instructional technology allows us to do that. Twitter is something that's kind of new for me. I know John Ork is, he says that he couldn't live without Twitter now, which is kind of interesting. But Twitter in the classroom, one of the struggles I think with social media, Twitter is viewed as social media. I think one of the struggles with that is trying to transform our view of that, in that Twitter can also be used as an educational tool as well. So can Facebook. So that we're still working in that area and trying to have those conversations with our students, with staff, and parents who are going to be asked to manage some of this as well. But using Twitter in the classroom is something that's very new, and our teachers are able to experience it by working with other teachers, and working with John Ork and determining how they can use it best in the classroom. So building this momentum, January 28th was our kickoff. Obviously, January 28th was right after we got exciting news from our board meeting that we would continue on with our deployment of one-to-one devices for the students next year. So that was very exciting for our building, even more exciting for our students. So that January 28th was spent taking an opportunity to hear from our pilot teachers. There is something to colleagues being able to share what's it really like in the classroom. There's a lot of apprehension built up about devices in the classroom, classroom management being more difficult for teachers. How do we know when they're on the appropriate website? What do we do if the student shows up to the class without the device charged? So a lot of those thoughts build in teachers' minds. So it was a great opportunity for us to have our pilot teachers, who we can't thank enough for the amount of work that they've done, be able to communicate. Here's what it's really like. It's not Gina or myself or Ken up in front of our staff describing to them these situations. A teacher who firsthand is in the classroom is able to talk with them about those experiences. So they really appreciated the opportunity to ask those specific questions to the pilot teachers and really get a glimpse of what it's like in the classroom. We also used January 28th, first of all, to really celebrate that decision. We wanted it to be a celebration, really, of good things to come with instructional technology in our classroom. We also used it to collect professional development needs from our staff. We took the opportunity to say, hey, what do you need? What do you need in your classroom? What do you need individually to be ready for 28 students entering your classroom with the device? And we wanted that to be shared with colleagues. We wanted those conversations to happen. That is how we build our professional development. We work with teachers, we work with North, we work with South. We all work together to build strategic professional development for our teachers. So that's something that we're absolutely able to do. And we mentioned the scaffolding. We're hearing from staff that, I'm very good at this, but not so good at this. So I need more training in this area. So it allows us to be able to scaffold that a little bit more. So January 28th was our official kickoff, if you will, gathering that information from teachers. We took on February 28th, which is our next session of PD, which is the 1-hour session, a few 1-hour sessions that we're going to offer for teachers. Again, taking it back to basics. We're hearing from teachers that starting at ground level with Google is important. And some teachers do need that boost to have the instruction in their classroom effective. You start at ground level, and then you're able to build the instructional technology in the classroom. Again, offering some of the same sessions that we did back last year and also in October. Many teachers didn't have an opportunity to experience all of the training sessions, so they wanted that back. They wanted the opportunity to do that again. Our Chromebook pilot panel, again, our teachers want to hear from other teachers. They want to hear what's it like, how has it transformed your classroom. So they want to hear their colleagues speak. And again, as Ken mentioned, looking at assessment, looking at how instructional technology can continue to grow in classrooms with formative assessment tools that are fun and engaging for students. It does get to a point where I observed a teacher who was using if you feel free to Google this if you like, Kahoot. Our students love it. It's a assessment tool that is interactive. It's exciting for students, and I'm not sure if they know that they're learning, but they do enjoy it. But it's something that is very exciting for them. So being able to use those tools in the classroom is really helpful. So February 25th, and then we move on to our June Institute sessions that we will continue to build and continue to gather knowledge from our teachers and determine exactly what they need in our classroom. So in our pilot teachers, again, we can't thank them we can't thank them enough. They've done an excellent job, and we really appreciate the effort and the amount of care and effort they've put in. So with that, I'll turn it over to Gina to close it out.
So as you heard from both Ken and Omar, what I think has been really powerful that the training we've provided and will continue to provide is that it's teachers teaching teachers or training teachers. And we're working towards that in terms of exactly what the summer trainings look like. We've offered summer trainings in instructional technology for many years. But we're working on differentiating that training so that it's not a one-size-fits-all type of training. Really focusing on what teachers need to know to teach in a one-to-one learning environment. And while we have many teachers that have, we certainly want to provide those different levels so that we meet teachers where they are. Much of that will focus on Google training. Much of it we know will be ongoing. So it's not just like one session and that's it. As we move towards August with the August Institute Days, a lot of the focus will be on one-to-one, even as we provide PD in other areas. It's certainly how this fits together, because it does all fit together, and how we can have teachers teaching teachers the practical side of it. So how do you mesh some of those common core skills that we talked about with the instructional technology? And then we certainly know that we need to continue to offer professional development, so that ongoing meeting teachers where they're at, providing here and now training, but also looking forward. We're certainly not operating in a mindset of once and done, but that this is something that will continue to grow and evolve with our staff. Questions?
I have a question. So people accept technology or integrate technology into their workday differently. We know that we've had some teachers who still don't necessarily post their grades efficiently. How are we going to evaluate those teachers who have a little bit harder time embracing the technology and using it to its full capacity to help them along that journey?
Well, certainly we're looking at differentiated professional development so that all teachers at one level have a they have a basic understanding. In terms of technology, it certainly is something that is evolving, and we expect teachers to grow in that area. Now, in terms of evaluation, that's very different. We might evaluate the trainings, we might evaluate how often teachers are using different methods in the classroom related to instructional technology, but certainly a lot of what I know Pete has spoken to us several times before in terms of teacher appraisal, a lot of the ways you can get to those higher levels, the more distinguished levels, require you to take learning to the next level. And the one-to-one learning will help teachers to do that. We already have many teachers that are doing that in both the one-to-one pilot and teachers who've been doing it for years.
So you would be critiquing not just on those opportunities when you're observing the teacher, but throughout the year? You'd be critiquing their use in the classroom?
As much as we can. Okay, thank you. And it's evolving. Again, we're looking at minimal expectations, and then where do we go from there? And some teachers are so far beyond that, that they almost always serve as trainers for us, because they are so far beyond that.
And would you rely on the department chair then to be monitoring his department more so than maybe you or?
You know, it's interesting that you bring that up, because one of the things that in the groups that I went to, and we all went to different groups just last week, but one of the things that I heard loud and clear was that teachers are really interested in how this best meets their needs in their specific content area.
Right.
So certainly department chairs will be an integral part of this.
Okay.
As we work toward what does it look like in social studies, in English, in fine arts, in mathematics. I mean, those are all very different content areas. And luckily, we have pilot teachers in nearly every department. So we're very fortunate. As well as we have faculty members that serve on the Instructional Tech Advisory Committee from nearly every department. So we have a lot of trailblazers out there from different departments, not all from the same department.
Can I add to that? It's not like we're gonna flip a switch next year with all the kids having Chromebooks and instructional technology is gonna skyrocket through the roof.
Yeah, you're gonna have
There's gonna be some growth, and we're fully aware of that, and we wanna support teachers, like I think what Omar said, Gina said, wherever they are. They need to identify where their point A is along this spectrum, and then determine what's my point B. Where do I need to go, and what supports do we have in place in District 99 that are gonna help me get to point B? And I think a big part of that are those conversations that teachers are having with each other, because some of them don't know what to ask. They don't know where to start.
Right.
But if they're in those conversations where they're listening and they're hearing what other teachers are doing in their content-specific classes, that's when some really neat conversations start occurring, and that's where someone says, wow, I didn't realize you can do that. I can see some of my kids benefiting from me doing that and learning that and identifying which teachers are going to help me get to that point B, and trying to have some structure in place to make that happen.
Do you see maybe this happening during the late starts, during the PLCs, more at the department level, or even at the individual counterpart level?
We've started that this year, where we've broadened our late start time to include some days 1 hour of professional development time, and some days it's 2 hours of professional development time. And so this year, in working with Pete and the Professional Growth Steering Committee, what offerings can we make available that are going to be most beneficial for teachers during those hours that we have for professional development? Yes.
Okay.
I'd also say with, the way we structure the pilot program was purposeful. And it is not a quarter of our faculty, but it's about a quarter of our students. And some of the people that were involved in the pilot just love technology, they're already using it, sort of feeding their engine, right? But there were a fair number of people who went into this, they had virtually no experience, and so we've also learned from them what they needed to learn, how they adapted, how they engaged the technology with what they're doing in the classroom. So, I mean, that was a big part of the pilot, was not just to make this available to people who would do it easily, but to gain experience with people who hadn't a lot of experience with it.
Right.
Okay, good.
Those were some of my questions, because usually the people who will step up and want to be the pilot teachers for this are the ones who are already technologically savvy. So I guess, my question is, and I know it's a rollout, I know that every teacher is not going to be, but what do you say? I guess there should be a certain level of expectation because we're rippling it out from those teachers who are savvy, okay? Because let's say, Terry's child goes in and she gets one of these, her child's in the classroom and this teacher is just pumping it out and it's great, and my child ends up in a classroom and the teacher is not so savvy with this. I guess I'm just looking at it as I don't want such a large discrepancy, I guess, between classrooms in the same content area. That would worry me a little bit.
I think that gets back to Rick's question in terms of departmental focus. And I think that's a key component, and that's something that we're working towards, is what that looks like in different departments and different content areas. It's not going to be the same in every department, obviously, but in similar courses.
Right.
And again, it's evolving. We've had, as Dr. McDonald said, we had one of the teachers come and speak to us at our exec council who, while willing to be part of the pilot, I wouldn't consider her tech savvy. And yet she sat down and was able to show us some things that I was extremely impressed by. But she was learning and she was trying things, and some days they were working very well and other days she learned from that. And I think it will evolve over time. But I don't think there's an expectation that, you have this out every minute of every day.
Right.
But I do think there will be minimum expectations.
Yes.
That, and if I, going
That there's
back to
no
the-
opt-out, really, right? The reason I ask this, and I don't mean to sound negative at all, but we have had, and we are getting some feedback even. I've gotten a few emails, and I think some of us have shared some, those emails that come to us. And there are parents who are a bit concerned, okay, because even we've had, Blackboard, and we've had other things that have been around for quite a while, and we will still hear occasional complaints of certain instructors who don't use those or are very, very late in getting the feedback for the parents or the students. And so I'm just, I guess I asked that question, how are we going to monitor and make sure that those tools are being used?
Well, if I could go back to the premise of this discussion, we're presenting things to the board that are from the goals that are challenges to us. We're not going to have all the answers tonight.
Right.
We do know there has to be expectations. And I think we've been very clear that there will be. Exactly what they are, I don't think we're prepared to say that tonight.
Okay.
But I think we've been very clear that we're not passing this out as you may choose to use them or not. That's really not an option. I don't think anyone is naive enough to think that's an option. But in terms of what teachers need to use them for, or why and how and when and how much, we don't have that information yet. We haven't reached that point yet. That's something that is evolving along with this process over the next 8 months.
Okay.
And it will probably continue to evolve after
Yeah.
we lay this out next year.
I don't know exactly where I read this, so, but I had heard that there was a district that was using the one-on-one, and must have been for a while, like today, would not count this as a snow day, because their instruction would be to their students all the time.
I read that as well.
Yeah.
Actually, it's a bill that's being introduced to the legislature.
Okay, all right, so that we can do that, so there
That's
wouldn't be
interesting.
any reason to move testing or anything.
Although we learned a month ago that that needs to go to contract negotiations.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's not something we're gonna do tomorrow or anything, but, this is a nice goal, because look at how it's really affected our testing schedule and graduation and all of that. It's just really.
Blackboard got mentioned. Is that going away?
We've actually had a lot of conversations about Blackboard, but no decisions have been made. We have a number of teachers who are huge Blackboard fans, and we have a number of teachers who've transitioned out of Blackboard. So that's something that we're looking at, but we haven't made a decision as to whether or not it'll go away.
I think consistency would be favorable.
But even if Blackboard went away, you'd still have to have some sort of consistent way to monitor, to put grades in.
Well,
We use home
yeah,
access
we
for
use home
that.
access. That is definitely not going away. And some of the features in home access for communications will not go away. So for example, sending an email through Home Access Center, they can,
Sure.
teachers can send an email. Those will stay. But Blackboard, in terms of a content management system, is something we are looking at.
Are universities using other things besides Blackboard?
There's a
Because I
lot of
know
different
when my
ones.
kids went to school, they felt like they were ahead of the game because we used Blackboard and so did both of their universities. So,
Yeah, it's still a popular post-secondary learning management system. And there's, just with everything else in technology, there's more and more LMSs coming out that some are free and some are costly, and it's just really finding out what's going to work best for our teachers and our kids. And if we were to get to the point where we're going to transition away from Blackboard, we would have to have an exit strategy. That's going to take maybe 2 or 3 years, because some people are so embedded in that than they have. Even our ASC, we have a lot of materials and documents in Blackboard that we'd have to transition out and have a strategy to do that if we were to transition to a new LMS, whatever that might be. Maybe if I could just offer something that I shared with some folks last week when we talked about professional development. We have this spectrum of these high-end users and these low-end users, and I think our goal for professional development is not to do this. It's to close this gap, not stop these people, but we want to continue learning, but try and close this gap, to bring up those users down here to feel more compelled and see the benefits and reasons why this is going to help their kids. And I think that's the kind of the platform we're aiming for as we look at the next 2 or 3 years, and there's really closing that gap that exists right now among our 400 teachers or so.
And with the professional development, don't be afraid to use these people to bring these people up, because I think you'll get more growth that way than.
Just identifying what it is that we need to do to get these people.
Whatever you have to do, use those people.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So we have development going on at North. We have development going on at South. Are we getting together? Yes?
Yes.
All right, wonderful.
In fact, in preparation for our February, the people who are facilitating those are planning those sessions together cross-town, so that it's a similar curriculum, so to speak, that they're providing teachers.
And don't the PLCs meet on the late starts across town too? The departments go from one campus to the other. Don't they have some co-working? Yeah. So they're doing that at the department level. Yeah.
It just varies.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
This was a great presentation and exciting, and a huge amount of work ahead of you, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Communications, Mrs. Browning?
Yep, I'm very jealous of Gina and all of her committees, so I thought we should start a committee in the communications. So, we've called this one the Community Advisory Committee, and this is part of our strategic plan in order to expand our communications with the entire community. So about a year and a half ago or so, we started the key communicators list. And essentially what this is a list of all of the people who are not in our eSchool program, not part of the District 99 families, and people in other government entities that, the villages and the libraries, et cetera. So we put them on our list so that they would receive our monthly newsletter. So that was one way to kind of expand outreach with them. And we also have something called the D99 FYI list. So this is another attempt to attract those people who are not in our district to get them to want to hear from us. So we have about 168 people who are part of these lists. And it's a good start, but it's really proven to be one-sided and not that two-sided conversation that we so want and that we want from our district open houses as well. So I know that we can have richer relationships with people if we have face-to-face conversations. So that's what we are trying to do with this new community advisory committee. And it's just going to be, I hope, more conducive to hearing about the challenges and opportunities that we have for our communications. So, and really helping to hone in on what we should focus on. And if you could advance the slides, I don't know who has that. So in our survey last spring, we asked people if they would join this new team, and if you'll recall, over 1,100 people responded to our survey, and 30 people left their name and their email and offered to be part of the group. Scheduling is always a tricky part of anything that we do. Tried to take the most available times for people, and that landed on Monday nights from 6:30 to 8. So we had a session already in October, and then we have 2 upcoming, one just this Monday night and then one in April. And a lot of the people said, I'd love to be a part of it, but I just cannot make those meetings. And so I have some virtual pen pals out there who have just emailed me individually, as I'm sure you have lots of those as well. So it's nice to have that relationship. 8 people attended, mostly parents, and there was 1 student, a pretty good balance. Gina was at the meeting, so I appreciated her attendance. It was a small group, so it was more conducive to people feeling comfortable and I think warming up by the end of things that they would like to see us do. I challenged the group to say, okay, I'd like to leave a meeting with 3 tangible things that we would like to have after the meeting, and ended up with 4 times that. So be careful what we wish for. We had a lot to do. So I'll highlight a few of those under the headings. First of all, parent relations, and sometimes the simple things are sometimes the most effective. People said that they were frustrated when they went to our websites and they'd click on send an email and they'd be directed to a form. And so they'd fill out that form and it would just go off into Never Never Land when they just wanted that email right then and there. So we've made a change, so when you click on that, it automatically pops open the mail client and they can send an email. So that doesn't seem like a huge change, but I think it'll be helpful to people. Along with the consistency too, we have a template so that people can fill out bio information, where they went to school, et cetera, but also some resources so that they can drop in their links of Blackboard or a Google site that they might have. So it'll be a nice landing page when you're looking for information about a teacher. You'll be able to go to the websites. So that's one thing. Sometimes we have some challenges with some neighbors about activities that we have going on who live nearby the school, and sometimes it has a negative impact on people. So this group suggested that we look at ways to approach that. And so we decided that we could add a new email list, North High neighbors and South High neighbors. And what we did was had a letter from the principals go out to all those neighbors surrounding the schools, asking them to sign up for this list. And we'll be developing a calendar of points that, there's construction going on at this point, or we're having, the SWAT team out on this date, so that people will not be caught off guard. So we've had over 100 people, 164 people sign up for those. So good response so far. I set out for each of you a new little piece that we distributed at the district open house. One topic that the group said, we don't know who these people are, the Board of Education, and sometimes you receive that too. I know Nancy's suggested this in the past as well. So people just want to know Board of Education 101. What is the Board of Education all about? Who are you? And also, very important, for those who wish to address the board, all this information is on our website, but again, just to make people feel more comfortable and you all more approachable, what is the protocol for approaching the board? So that was one thing that we did in response to that. The community group kind of echoed what our survey said, which is that people are not really keen on Facebook and Twitter. The parents are more old school and email. And they also really highlighted the Nextdoor website. I don't know if any of you are on it. Maybe Mike is on it. But it's a hyper-local social media site. So you have to be a neighbor or be invited by neighbors in order to be part of this group. And so personally, I'm a member of the Whittier neighborhood group there that's highlighted, and you can see the divisions. It matches perfectly with our district. So you can really narrow in on the conversations that people are having rather. I know that the village is a member of this Nextdoor, but I contacted Nextdoor and they said, at this time, unfortunately, they can't accommodate other government entities, so I'll keep trying, but they're on my radar to infiltrate. But we'll be able to just really get into those conversations that we normally would be an outsider to, so that we could hear what the issues are and also, share information like school closings, for example. Though people receive that message pretty easily, I'd say.
Just read a complaint today about it.
Of course, we heard tonight all of the different topics that people, that the district is talking about, the standardized testing, the one-to-one learning. I'll be asking that group for input about the plans that we have with surrounding communications for those. And just review this process. I hope to get more people in next time, but it's very helpful no matter what size group. So it's nice to make new friends and have conversations and learn from their experiences, because they echo a lot what the Board of Education says as well. And I'd welcome you to our next meeting is next Monday right here at 6:30. So.
Yeah, I'll just offer that I actually dropped in on the October 27th just to thank everyone for showing up. So I think it'd be good if one of us, at least one of us, could do that at the 9th and the 27th. Just to thank, it's hard to get people interested. So here's some people that have volunteered their time. So maybe we can think about that. This is terrific. I especially appreciate the neighborhood sign up for the neighborhood relations. That keeping people informed, that makes our job a little easier, doesn't it? We're liable to get a little less when that SWAT team thing's going on.
Right.
Somebody texting me or emailing me saying, what the heck are you doing over there? And then maybe, nobody else is on Nextdoor? Because that's, that's like focused around those, around your elementary school, primarily. So you don't have to participate, but you can kind of watch what people are saying, and it's a little. Actually, there was something today. I thought, oh my gosh, we can't win these school closing things. What are you going to do? Close early, close late. Don't close. But it's interesting anyhow to see. People will make a comment, and you get some sense for at least what people are thinking. But this is all great stuff. Hopefully people are interested in what we do. That would be great. Yeah. There's at least one person in the audience tonight that is, so that's good. Anyhow, thank you.
Try to take the mystery out of it.
There you go. Well, maybe I could use a little of that.
I'd like to be a mystery.
You like to be a mystery? I've always thought of you as a mysterious woman, Terry. Quick question. Do we have any kind of, or maybe it's the community thing, do we reach out to any of the businesses in the area?
Any of the what?
Businesses, because we have students who work for businesses. We have businesses who rely on our student base for being here, like Starbucks and Scoobies, and then we have businesses that the foundation works with. So,
well, and the school's CTE departments have job fairs or that they've hosted. So I know, Mike's been part of that as an architect. So that's one way. But we do have the connection with the chamber through the Attainable Futures program.
Okay.
I think aren't we a member too?
We are, or the
believe.
foundation is, we're both, foundation and the district.
But that's, to your point, Nancy, maybe you're suggesting that we might do a little bit more there in terms of communication. There might be something.
There might be something, and we also service other areas than Downers Grove.
Well, it's Chamber 630, so they've just, the Downers Grove area Chamber of Commerce and the Woodridge Chamber of Commerce merged to form a new Chamber of Commerce, and so that
encompasses all the same areas that we draw from?
I would say they pretty much cover, real close.
And the foundation does sponsor the Attainable Futures.
Okay. So there is a good relationship there.
We've participated in their golf outings and fundraisers and sponsored a whole, so.
I just wonder, I think your point, Nancy, is that there might be something, contacting the chamber, there might be something from a communication standpoint, in your efforts to infiltrate different groups and what's going on. Maybe there's something more we could do.
It's a thought.
With them, so.
Okay, anything else? Thanks, Jill. Always something exciting from you. Mysterious and exciting. Okay.
I'd like to just discuss briefly with the board, and I mean, within 15 minutes if possible, since, you know, it's going to be a long week this week for everybody. For a while, maybe a year or more ago, Darlene Rossetti came to the superintendents in DuPage County and was very interested in talking about some sort of marketing plan to put in the media a positive narrative about public education in this area and in the state. And her premise was that there are, in a lot of quarters, and the narrative about public education is what people want it to be for their own needs and interests. And that, frankly, we don't do a very good job of promoting public education ourselves. We pretty much accept the narrative as it's given. And interestingly, if you know, my own perception of the governor's campaign that occurred a couple months ago, I don't think the gubernatorial candidates differed very much in their platform on public education. It was pretty similar to what I believe they detected through market research, supporting charters and other things such as that, but certainly not very positive about it. And so Darlene's premise is that we should be more aggressive about marketing ourselves. And if we don't, we'll be at the mercy of, you know, the narrative is more than just words. It becomes people's perceptions and how people values the work we do and supports the work we do and so forth. So she, her own came up with, through her own context, came up with a group of people, and arguably these people are not from around here. They're from Washington, D.C., which may be an issue. But they came and talked to the superintendents about a strategy for marketing that they've developed, in which case they do some market research and then they create commercials or ads or whatever, an ad campaign, and to basically at least get our voice out in the public. And I think all of you have heard about Vision 2020. I was at the school board conference, and you know, frankly, I don't know a lot about Vision 2020. I think generally the concept is very good, and I think many of my colleagues in the county have asked their boards to endorse Vision 2020 formally. But one of the flaws of Vision 2020, in my opinion, is there is no real marketing plan for Vision 2020. It's here's a vision, and superintendents should go and talk to parents and have the parents talk to legislators. Well, that's a very good thing, but I don't think that's a professional marketing campaign, and my guess is what's very likely to happen with Vision 2020 is people cherry pick the things they like about it and ignore the other things that are more difficult or expensive or challenging to implement. Yet, that doesn't, the marketing part of it doesn't seem to be big on the agenda of the people that put Vision 2020 together. So I have my, I'm not thrilled with that part of it. Anyway, Darlene has a survey out to the superintendents. She has a plan to engage, if not this marketing firm, another one, and would ask that each school district contribute to the cause $1,500. My personal belief is I think this is a very interesting and perhaps valuable thing to do. But before I spend $1,500 of the district's money, I figured I would bring it to you and hear what you had to say. And if you don't think that's a good idea, then I'll tell her that we're not going to do it. But I do have a sense that we don't market ourselves very well. It's not our business to do, but unfortunately, we're not helping ourselves because we don't do it. And by we, I mean the enterprise of education in our community, in our county, in our area, in our state.
I'll just step in first, might as well. You know, I don't have a problem with the marketing campaign. I guess my thing is if we do decide to give her $1,500, that I think that we need to you know, ask for a committee of some kind of superintendents or something to monitor that money and how it is spent, because nothing against Dr. Rossetti, but I would hate to have that money all at her disposal and her make the decision on her own. And I think if we've got skin in the game,
There you
then
go.
we need to have a voice in the game.
Echo that.
And
My
so
question too
that's
is,
mine.
if we decide to enter into this agreement, what about the school that says no? Would they still be under the marketing plan of DuPage County, and would they get the benefit on our dollar? Or would the
Probably,
marketing
yeah.
plan only be for the schools that participated?
It's gonna be for everybody.
My sense is that the purpose of the marketing campaign is to have some sort of presence in media. And that would indicate that, you're right, you're absolutely right, Rick. If I decide I'm not going to contribute to the pot, I'm still going to benefit from the positive narrative.
Right.
I think it's a fabulous idea.
Yeah.
You know, in a public that lives at sound bites during election time.
Right.
I think getting the message out about the value that public education brings, not only to those people who have children in the system, but those people who benefit in other ways from the system, is a wonderful thing. And I think $1,500 is a very small amount to invest in that. I think I agree with Terry, I think it would be nice to have somebody representing District
Yes, I do.
99, but I don't think that's a deal breaker personally. I'd be supportive of
Well,
it.
maybe I'm not saying just District 99. It's some sort of a
Somebody,
committee
oversight committee. Yeah.
of, you know.
Maybe 3 people or whatever, yeah.
Well, you know, maybe 5 or 7, you know, kind of thing, so that there's more than one person making some of those critical decisions.
Okay.
I think it's a good idea though, too.
I endorse the concept for sure.
Yeah.
Whether it's $1, $1,500, or $50,000 or any, I'm going to be very careful about how we spend any dollar. And I would need, you know, before I agreed to give any money to this, I'd need to know a lot more. We have a proposal that was put forward. I want to know, were there other proposals considered? I see a price tag there, total price tag on that proposal of $175,000, and that did not include costs for airtime and things like this. That was just the
It's really
consultant
costly.
services to put the plan together, basically. And then a whole list of really credentialed people, but I'd want to know which one of those credentialed people are going to be directly involved in this, or is this just, here's all these great people we've got, but guess what, we're going to get this person over here. And I certainly think that we need some representation in the process. If we're going to help fund the process, whether it's Mark or what, there, you know, if it's our thing, there needs to be accountability. So, but I wholeheartly endorse the concept, the idea that other people are going to write the narrative for us if we don't. And there's so many wonderful things that we're doing, yet we don't. You know, maybe we're not publicizing it enough. I'm on board with that, but I don't. It seems like it's too soon right now to commit dollars, and I'd need to see the budget. I mean, how does 15? What's the, certainly not everybody will participate, so what's the anticipation, and then what are those dollars going to go for? This is too loose.
Is the $175,000 just going to the ad agency?
Yes.
Well, and here's
You
the
know,
other thing,
Which
too.
could be worth it
I'll
if-
play devil's advocate here, you know. I'm all for promoting our school, our district, and I believe in public education,
That's a good point.
but
Yep.
all public education is not equal. And I can't, in good faith, be promoting an umbrella of schools where we don't have the control of what's going on in that school. It might not be something that,
I didn't think of this. This is good.
I mean,
Yeah, look at Orland Park.
we do what we could certainly always do. I mean, Jill's always looking for bigger and better ideas to promote District 99. And I am sure that probably within DuPage, we probably have more great schools than mediocre or bad schools. But in promoting all of public education, and even saying that, even in DuPage County, there are some schools that are subpar to our district. And I'm not sure that I would want to promote all the things that maybe they are doing in their district that we would not do here and not support in our own. So it's just a thought, and I'm not saying, I'm not trying to be, negative at all.
No.
But if I were going to be spending that money, but people move to this district because they already know about the school. So I think we do a fairly adequate job of promoting our school, and if I was going to spend that money, I would continue to promote our school. And I'm not saying that I don't believe in public education, because I do, but I guess I'd want my money to stay here.
Yeah, so maybe a better plan would be something where there were more supports to local districts to help encourage and help support their own publicizing of what they're doing well within their community. More emphasis on
See,
that.
I would argue that you've got to bring up the consciousness of the taxpayer so that they would be demanding of their legislature to understand more about what's going on in public education, to support them voting pro-public education. And I think, whereas I think I would like, to your point, I think it would be nice to have, we should ask for some oversight to those funds, to ask one of our administrators to put in, 100 hours in that activity. It's going to cost us a lot more than $1,500. So I still think it's a good idea.
Well, you can get a whole lot more with,
Right.
I don't know how many districts there
Economies
are
of
in
scale.
DuPage County.
Get everyone together.
At $1,500 apiece, you can get a lot more bang for your buck, because it would cost us a whole lot more
Sure.
than $1,500 to do any sort of an ad campaign, correct?
Well, that's true.
That's what you wonder about, though, Terry, is that if we do this, and this was just the consulting, so where is this going to, and how much
Well,
more
how
are we
much
going to be
more are
asked?
they gonna ask for?
And I just need to see it a better.
And then, does it come
plan.
back to our district, and then we just tag on to it? Is it like, McDonald's, they have a big ad agency and they do a big ad campaign, and then, the local markets do one too, along with that, kind of a piggyback kind of thing. And so there are a lot of questions, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So, this is just really very preliminary.
Right.
And to be honest with you, I don't think we should fork over any money at this stage.
Right.
Because there's too many questions that have to be answered. And I think she needs to get that together and answer them before any of us, and I'm thinking any district.
I agree.
I appreciate the feedback. One of the things I would say, just because I want to make sure it's clear, it isn't necessarily the marketing that's important. It's the message that's important. And Darlene brought these people out to talk to us, and when their commentary was, you guys don't really know what the message is. You may think you know, but you don't know. And they said, why class size is important to parents? You're probably thinking that teacher has more time to work with the student if it's a smaller class. But most parents see that as, if there's a smaller class size, it's easier for the teacher to keep order in the class. It's about maintaining order and discipline. It's not. So if you say we're going to have lower class size so we could we can improve achievement, that's not going to resonate with the parents as much, according to this market survey and this particular group of parents, than to say, we're going to have lower class sizes because we want to keep order and discipline. And so the purpose of the professionals doing market research is to inform us about what do people really think? What do they really value? We think we know what they value, but we may not know. I mean, that was the essence of their presentation. But I understand this needs to be fleshed out more, and I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah. Because I mean, if they're going to give us like a POP kit where each district has the tools and then they have to market it, then that's something that we would have to put in our budget too. To
Thank you.
Okay. So moving on to the reception of visitors. This is an opportunity to address the board. Hearing none. Do we have a motion for adjournment?
Can I make a couple comments?
Sure, go ahead.
This is the board orientation binder. What we typically do is take the one from 2 years ago and edit it. This year we found we had to change substantial portions of it because we made a lot of changes. So this is different than the one you received
That I
2 years
received.
ago.
Yeah.
Everyone received one.
Yeah.
But it should be pretty current, and it should reflect a lot of the positive changes we've made, such as board meeting schedule, communications, no longer has information about No Child Left Behind, the Prairie State Achievement Exam, because right now those don't exist for us, and a lot of other things. So that's your copy, and Mr. Renner is in the audience. We'll give him his copy tonight. As you know, we have an orientation meeting for him next Monday night. The board is welcome to come, but we do ask you to tell us if you're coming, because if more than 2 people come, it's got to be posted, or more than 2 people come, we have to post it as a meeting.
is that a conflict with your meeting?
Yes. But we'll figure it out.
We can come in, but we can have somebody come over and say, you want to go?
I put it on my calendar.
Also, tomorrow night, we're making a presentation to the village council about digital signs.
I'm going to that.
I believe we're on the agenda as,
Are we going to be there? Yeah.
I don't know, we're on the agenda relatively early in the process. Just to remind the board, we are seeking a text amendment. It's a different process than previously, and that is that the council is going to determine whether they determine this tomorrow night or not. I don't know. Mr. Fieldman, the village manager, I talked to him today, and he said he didn't know when they're going to decide this. But it's my understanding that they're going to look at the text amendment on its merits and decide whether it's going to go forward for a full review or whether it's going to be denied. So I think that the point is we're not going to waste people's time if they don't see the possibility of any merit. So I don't know what that outcome is going to be. Obviously, if the village council agrees to let it proceed, it is not a pro forma yes vote in the end. It's only that it will allow it to proceed. And I would presume that will take several months to resolve that in its own process. But I just, so you're aware that we are going to the village council tomorrow.
And that meeting's at 7 PM?
I believe it's at 7 PM, yes.
7, okay. Yes, I think as many of us as possible show up. That's my feeling. Am I correct, Dr. McDonald?
Absolutely, Mrs. Pavasich.
We'll know some names.
Is there anything else?
I don't think so.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for your time. We are adjourned.